sector engagement in Pakistan. This session is hosted in collaboration with Overseas Investment Chambers of Commerce and Industry, OICCI, and Sustainable Development Policy Institute as part of 27th Flagship Sustainable Development Conference. This year's conference theme is From Fragility to Resilience. We are looking for a pathway how to navigate from this multifaceted, multi-pronged fragility that is in the economic sector, that is in the environment sector, and that is in Pakistan's overall socio-economic fabric, how we can move and transform this fragility into resilience. One way to do is to have a collaborative approach, integrated approach. And for this collaborative approach, role of private sector is very important. The engagement is very important. As we gather today, the world stand facing unprecedented environment challenges. The annual Conference of Parties, COP, serve as a critical venue for advancing global climate agendas for over time has expanded from a diplomatic gathering, from a technical gathering into a forum that defines actionable commitments to combat climate change. The recent summits addressing climate financing, adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage. Today, we examine how these COP commitments intersect with Pakistan's unique environmental and economic landscape, because these issues are intertwined. We cannot ignore the climatic dimensions when planning for the macroeconomic policies, but in developing countries, particularly Pakistan. Our focus on COP29 highlights the urgency of mobilizing green financing and technological solutions to combat climate change. Pakistan, as one of the most climate vulnerable nations, faces severe and escalating climate impacts. The floods of 2022 alone caused about 14.9 billion in damages. Total loss and damage was around 30 billion USDs. It displaced around 7.9 million people and threatened food security, public health, and economic stability. It also exposed Pakistan to these climatic shocks that can be translated into macroeconomic shocks as well. So we need to have this collaborative approach so we can have an integrated, holistic, whole of sector, whole of society approach. Today's pre-COP event meeting aims to refine and solidify Pakistan's stance for COP29. Our objective is to present a well-defined case that underscore Pakistan's commitment with the collaboration at multi-level stakeholders, for example, from public sector, from private sector, and from the community perspective as well. For this, we have a very august panel. May I request Mr. Jason Avancia, forgive me if I am pronouncing it wrong, but please, may I request Mr. Jason to come on the stage. Mr. Samuel Risk from UNDP. Ms. Fatma Arshad. Mr. Fawad Sumro. Mr. Adnan Pasha Siddiqui. Dr. Muhammad Rafiq, obviously the most important person in the room because he represents Climate Change Authority as well and member Climate Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, this is, forgive me, Excellency Waqar Sheikh. Sir, please, you can join us on the stage as well. So this completes our panel. This is very august panel, very learned one. We are looking forward to an insightful discussion around how to integrate public sector, private sector, and bring integrated agenda forward to COP29. Just to give you one example, how drastic this climatic adversities are in Pakistan, the scale of it, the magnitude of it. The 2022 floods, the damage caused by those floods were around 30 billion USDs. At that year, Pakistan's total GDP was 300 billion USDs, and saving rate was 10% of total Pakistan, which means the total saving of 1 year of whole population of Pakistan was around 30 billion, and one flood washed it away. This is the magnitude, this is the scale of 2022 floods. Private sector's role is very important. To discuss this, I would like to invite Mr. Jason Avansha, the Senior Vice President of OICCI and CEO and MD of Nestle Pakistan, for his keynote address. Mr. Jason.
Good afternoon. Our distinguished guests, speakers, Executive Director of the SDPI, Dr. Abid, Mr. Alim from OICCI, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It's really a great honor to be here with you today at the SDPI's 27th Sustainable Development Conference, representing the Overseas Investors Chamber of Commerce and Industry. As you know, OICCI is the oldest and largest investment chamber in Pakistan. We represent over 200 plus companies in 30 countries in over 14 sectors, generating about $40 billion in revenue. And we are the largest contributors to the national tax exchequer. Similarly, last year, the Chamber's contribution to social responsibility and sustainability amounted to over 13 billion rupees. Climate change, as you know, is no longer a distant threat. It is a present reality that demands urgent and collective action. According to the United Nations report, Pakistan is the fifth most vulnerable country to climate, facing extreme weather events and environmental degradation to floods. The need for climate action in Pakistan is particularly acute, and we have a crucial role to play in addressing this need. As representatives of some of the largest private sector stakeholders, we believe a responsibility to advancing sustainable practices and environmental stewardship within the business community here in the country. It gives me a great pride to say that OICCI is already playing a monumental role. As the sole private sector participant from Pakistan at last year's COP28, and with plans to participate in COP29 this month, OICCI has been advocating for sustainable practices and fostering public-private partnerships to address climate challenges. Through initiatives such as the Pakistan Climate Conference, OICCI has cultivated the dialogue and formulated actionable recommendations to support the nation's transition to a climate-resilient future. OICCI's engagement in Global Climate Forum, including the COP28, highlights our pivotal role in mobilizing capital for decarbonization, promoting circular economic practices, influencing policies that align with Pakistan's government's climate action objectives. Furthermore, just to share that OICCI member companies are making great strides. The installation of solar power plants with capacities targeting a 30% reduction in Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon emissions by 2030 achieving liquid discharge, zero liquid discharge in wastewater management are just a few to name. Additionally, our members are aiming to increase water recycling ratios within plants by 35% and reduce plastic usage for a waste-free future by 1/3. At the same time, I urge you all to remain committed to this journey as our long-term goals are ambitious and require more efforts. OICCI member companies aim to achieve carbon neutrality between 2040 until 2050, with a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Investments will be made in renewable energy sources, with a significant push towards solar and wind energy, and transition to Euro V compliant fuels by 2030. It gives me immense pride to share with you that member companies, including Unilever, BASF, Standard Chartered, Infrazamin, Abbott, Dowlance, Indus Motor Company, just to mention amongst others, are working on climate initiatives that will lead us to a sustainable future. Meanwhile, at Nestlé, we have made remarkable progress on all these fronts. We are accelerating our efforts to reduce our carbon footprint in line with our commitment, our global commitment, to reduce emissions by 20% versus baseline of 2018 by next year, and having them by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. Continuing our efforts, we committed the investment of at least 2 billion rupees every year towards renewable energy. And last year, we have inaugurated a 2.5 megawatts and 2.6 megawatts solar power plants at our Karbiwala and Shikupura factories. This is part of our larger renewable energy strategy, which plans to introduce additional solar power plants, biomass boilers, soon at our manufacturing sites in the country. Similarly, we have also implemented several initiatives to reduce greenhouse emissions across our value chain, mainly in agriculture and dairy business. As we recognize that agriculture contributes significant to carbon footprint alongside with reforestation program, it is our hope that we will continue to inspire each other to embrace similar practices and contribute to the broader climate action agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, all of us here today are no strangers to the smog that's starting impacting our health during winter. A few years ago, it would impact Pakistani residents during December and January. But this year, the residents of Lahore have been facing its impact since October. While the government continues to work on addressing this acute issue at hand in the long term, a sustainable impact will be possible if the private sector commits to climate and are supported by green financing in the long term. Hence, it is imperative that the private sector explore different green financing options, such as the green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, and the State Bank of Pakistan, creating a policy framework to encourage this. Our goal is to bridge the $152 billion adaptation financing gap by making green finance and sustainability a core focus. By utilizing green financing, companies will be able to align their financial activities with their sustainable objectives. As Pakistan prepares for COP29, the stakes are for the private sector. Investment in green financing are higher than ever. Let's leverage on this platform to highlight impact of climate initiatives and advocate for a collaborative approach to achieving Pakistan's climate goals. Together, we can drive a meaningful change and contribute to a sustainable future in Pakistan. Thank you, and Pakistan Zindabad.
Thank you, Mr. Jason, for highlighting what phenomenal role OICCI is playing when it comes to the integration of economy and environment and initiative that has brought in Pakistan, learning from the best practices in the head offices of these multinationals and transferring these initiative to the local industry as well. So thank you so much for that. With this, I'll invite Mr. Samuel Risk. Mr. Samuel Risk knows no introduction. He is a very good friend of Pakistan, the resident representative of United Nations Development Program, Pakistan. May I request Mr. Sam for his keynote address here.
Thank you very much to SDPI for turning off the drone. I think, first of all, I'm sure it's not comfortable to speak these days with drones hovering around us. But honorable panelists and guests, whether you're from government and the private sector and other development partners, it's a real pleasure to be here in what I think is also another pre-COP event. I think many of us have been to many pre-COPs event. Everyone is ready for the COP now to be in place and then to conclude as well. I'd like to share a few things, but also in the meantime, also answer a couple of questions that I think relate generally to the work that we are doing in UNDP. And I think in turn, a great opportunity to also highlight some of the partnerships with the private sector that are in place. I'm very happy that this particular collaboration is with OICCI and many others as well. So what I want to share today is a little bit of an experience on how we in UNDP, alongside others, have been working on mobilizing climate finance and green investments in Pakistan through the private sector. Some of them relate to us, some of them relate to the work that we currently and then intend to do in the future. So whether you go back to 2022 or you go back much farther, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's very easy to say the next talking point, which is Pakistan has experienced a set of complex macroeconomic challenges in recent years. If you just look at 2022, 2023, and 2024, add to that a political transition, add to that security issues, add to that, obviously, the flood from 2022. And then, you know, the massive losses that can happen in one single incident that in a couple of weeks in August 2022 can wipe 10% out of your GDP. And Pakistan, I think, in the last couple of years has been in a very difficult spot, albeit between June 2023 on the brink of default to where we are now in 2024, a remarkable turnaround, focusing on macroeconomic issues, culminating in the signing of the IMF agreement. Although I believe if you probably ask, you know, people in villages, districts, etc., do you actually feel the difference that this macroeconomic upbeat perspective is sharing in the news, etc.? I'm not sure the sense would be that positive. Nonetheless, I think from an investment perspective, from a private sector perspective, all of this ends up being positive for investment, a positive space. We may come back, I imagine, to a discussion around how critical it is, how important it is for also government here in Pakistan to make life easy for investors, whether they are current or whether they are future. Where is Pakistan on the SDGs map, the Sustainable Development Goals? Now about 5 years to go. Not great, I think, is the simple response. The Sustainable Development Goals Insights report from last year that went from Pakistan to the Sustainable Development Summit, middle of 2023, September 2023, basically said that Pakistan is on track to meet 35 out of 169 targets. That is well below what is expected now. If you try to quantify this in terms of money required for sustainable development goals, Pakistan will need about $52 billion between now and 2030 to be able to actually meet these targets. Effectively, Pakistan needs around to spend around 16% of its GDP towards sustainable development goals to meet this target. Very tough when obviously you're spending quite a bit of your own money servicing loans. another question that I think looms on the horizon of whether we talk about achieving SDGs or development finance or climate finance as well. If you just look at Pakistan's climate commitments, environment commitments, nationally determined contributions, the government of Pakistan itself has estimated that it needs between $7 to $14 billion by 2030 for climate adaptation in this country. If you think about the last 2 years, grant money for a country like Pakistan has not been forthcoming. Humanitarian money after the flood, maybe $600 or $700 million out of a flood appeal of $800+ million that ended. And therefore, what are the other sources that are required for either climate finance or development finance to meet strategies? What is needed is new money and fresh money rather than rolled over money in many cases. And this is where I think this particular session with the private sector is really quite critical. It's not about where and how to do business, but about the ability to actually do business in a way that transforms people's lives. Therefore, engagement with the private sector is essential to achieve not only the climate goals, but almost every other goal, and to advance Pakistan's progress toward the SDGs and climate resilience as well. For the last couple of years, we have been trying to also support the government of Pakistan to spread the word around the bankability of the country in different fora. The Sustainable Development Goals Investment Forum that takes place almost regularly in New York over the last couple of years, based on a Standard Chartered Bank estimate, requires a private investment worth up to about $100 billion to get to also support the SDGs. And I'll talk a little bit more about, how that ends up breaking down as well. So I'd like to try in the next couple of minutes to sum up by answering two questions. One is about where we are in terms of private capital. I'm sure we'll hear quite a bit of that as well, including the work that we have been doing in the SDG Investment and Climate Finance Facility. And then how can we collaborate with local institutions, the private sector, to be able to bridge this particular gap over the coming years as well. So through the SDG Investment and Climate Finance Facility, we're trying to figure out, alongside many others, how to promote high-impact, SDG-aligned climate finance value propositions with a particular focus on the role of the private sector there. So, curiously enough, like many others over the last couple of years, and you may hear this regularly in Pakistan now, we too also have a pipeline of bankable projects that are worth up to $10 billion. Bankable projects is the big thing. And my concern about bankable projects is that they now sit on the shelf next to other bankable projects. Who is actually taking these projects to the bank? Are bankable projects still bankable after 1 or 2 years, given how rapid the changes actually happen on tech or innovation or something else? The bankability of the country, I think now is not in doubt. A year ago, I think a discussion around bankable projects would have been difficult for the private sector. Now macroeconomic stability, I think, can help that. So we too have developed up to $10 billion worth of bankable projects for SDG aligned and climate resilient projects as well, focusing on public and the private sector and in various critical areas like renewable energy, infrastructure, and IT as well. And the thing about these particular bankable projects is that they are already pre-vetted for environmental, social, and governance safeguards. And there's a particular tool to be able to use them. What happens with these projects and others, I think, is a good discussion for now as well. We took these bankable projects to the SDG Investment Fair in New York last year, then again this year, and I think in 2025 in Spain, we will also do the same as well, in addition to COP27, COP28, and probably COP29 as well. How we got here is through policy research, knowledge generation, advocacy, and capacity building, including a lot of collaboration with national institutions to make sure that these projects are viable, inclusive, can be implemented, and the bottom line is can actually make a difference for people's lives as well. But as I mentioned there, we believe in UNDP that there is a place for funding, grant money. There's a place for financing, loans, bracketed by concessional, etc., all of these things. There's a place for investment, which is the role of the private sector, and who and how we can help them do that as well. And then there's also a place for risk insurance and de-risking. The big question, I think, that happened around the 2022 flood, and I think is still a lingering question, is what is everybody's role, especially those that are able to either advocate or offer money here or outside, to offer risk insurance to the most vulnerable? If people don't actually have disposable income in their pocket to be able to spend on insurance, will they spend it on insurance or education or health, etc.? So this idea of making Pakistan resilient to the next shock, whether it's a flood or an earthquake or something else, I think requires us to have a discussion around insurance, so that if or when something catastrophic happens and billions of dollars are wiped out, 2 million plus houses are wiped out, livelihoods wiped out, people are displaced, etc., somebody will help them recover. And I can share a quick story of what that actually means. Up north, the UNDP has a project called GLOF, Glacial Lake Outburst Flood. There were, I think it was around August, there were 6 GLOF events in one area in and around Chitral. Of these 6 areas, 2 locations were covered by our GLOF project. We were able to support them. 4 others we were not able to support because of financial constraints. What does it take to be able to help some of these locations recover after a devastating event? But because they were already part of our program, $2,000 in one location, $7,000 in another location. This is not very big money. This is actually doable and can be part of the assurance that we offer people, climate resilient people, climate resilient communities, and climate resilient institutions as well. Maybe I jump here to the next part, which I think relates mostly to this discussion as well. In UNDP, we basically advocate and practice an ecosystem approach towards private and green investments. This means going beyond particular projects. And we have also structured financial tools to raise climate financing for Pakistan, like the ones that I mentioned, including some of the discussions that we've been having with government around debt swaps, for example. There seems to be an experience of a decade long of debt swaps, maybe 10%, 20% successful, but it is important for a country that has a lot of debt, will likely continue to have a lot of debt, but everyone seems interested in either climate finance or recovery or climate resilient projects. That is an opportunity there. Debt for nature, debt for environment, and other areas. Blended financing is also part of what we are doing as well. So as we focus on climate finance and the new collective quantified goal, that is actually now the next big thing in Baku, $100 billion annually for developing nations, perhaps to replace loss and damage ambitions, which are not really there anymore. We have been working on innovative financial tools such as blended and results-based financing. And this is where the first opportunity for us to be able to partner with the private sector came, at least in my tenure over the last one or so years. We've collaborated with the GCF accredited JS Bank on innovative blended financing. We tried with HBL, didn't seem to work. So that's why we are with, with JS Bank now. Happy to explore others as well. Secondly, the work that we do on public finance, I think is important, is required. The question to all of us is how much more capacity building do we need to do and with who in order for that to be sustained and predictable, and then everyone moves on as well. Most recently, we signed a partnership with Fatma Fertilizer Group. You'll see a video after I finish in a couple of minutes, leading private sector enterprise and agri-sector to adopt an SDG impact framework to achieve sustainable incomes as well. Over the last year and 3 months, the partnership with OICCI has been signed, a partnership with Jazz, Fatima Group, discussions with Engro on energy and many others. Glad to see them on the panel today. as well, previous partnerships with Coca-Cola and others too. So I think on our part, what we are learning more and more, and this is a continuous learning process, is that it is possible for the private sector to do well and to do good at the same time. We are well beyond this perspective on charity or even corporate social responsibility. This is a deliberate effort to align to sustainable development goals, because I believe what we hear from our OICCI partners and many others, that this is in the end good for business. It is important from a human development perspective for people to be healthy, educated, have access to decent, predictable jobs, etc. And that is actually good for here and the country. So I close here by saying once again, thanks to SDPI for the invitation. Very pleased to be part of this particular panel. And I think we have a 3-minute and 30-second video to show as well. Thanks again.
May I request the IT team to play the video?
का पत्ता बूटा बूटा आज हमारा जाने है। जर्रा जर्रा कतरा कतरा इनसे पहचाने है। जोरों की आवाज नहीं, हाथ अब बनकर रहना है। रास्ता है दुश्वार मगर हाथ हमें ही देना है। ज़बान को साफ करो, हमें सांस यहीं पर लेना है। अब बात नहीं और आज नहीं, सदियों को तय करना है। पत्ता का बूढ़ा राज हमारा जाने है। जर्रा जर्रा पतरा पतरा कदर हम इसकी जाने है।
you so much, Sam, for a very enlightening speech and highlighting this role of SDGs, developmental finance plus climate finance, and how we can sort of integrate climate financial practices, initiatives into development. And for the video as well, that highlights this case study, highlighting multiple SDGs, how private sector can play a role in achieving these multiple SDGs. My takeaway from your speech would be how we can find new monies, new investments into this domain, how we can integrate private sector through innovative ideas, through innovative initiatives. What are different aspects of de-risking, risk insurance, particularly for vulnerable segment of the society, different blended finance solutions, debt to swaps, and again, the ultimate goal is how we can integrate this climate agenda, climate finance into the broader macroeconomic picture, particularly for the developing countries, particularly for Pakistan. So thank you so much for that. This brings me to our panel discussion. We have very august, insightful panelists with us. Let me start with the right of our audience, Ms. Fatma Arshad. Ms. Fatma Arshad is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Unilever Pakistan. Ms. Fatma, may I ask you, what are different ambitious climate goals which requires regulatory and financial policy reforms that could further facilitate sustainable practices, particularly the circular economy in Pakistan? In what ways can these practices be scaled to align with, as this is a pre-COP session, so how these can be scaled to align with COP29's climate commitments, thereby maximizing their national impact and regional, and how we can make a holistic global framework for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's definitely a big task. I think I will speak about what we are doing, but also largely some of the priority areas that private sector companies are working on, they're very interrelated or almost the same. Climate is a priority for most companies. A lot of companies are working on nature, as are we. Then there is circularity. And I think what sits at the heart of it is the human cost, how people are impacted by it, both in terms of their health, livelihoods, their safety, and continued well-being. And it's important to look at it from the perspective of, the fact that a lot of companies already have global commitments of their own at a local level, or are working with the compliances of global importers, if they're in the export or local sector. And they're already working on how to manage their own emissions, their own circularity, their own impact on the planet better. And obviously this requires resourcing and money, which companies are already spending. However, there is an opportunity at a national level in Pakistan, and then there is an opportunity within the private sector in Pakistan from an investment perspective. At a national level, what private sector companies are doing is a good case study that can potentially be used to scale solutions. And that is more from the perspective of the government working with the private sector and civil society and bringing that money into Pakistan. For us at our level, when we work within our scope 1 and scope 2, we work with a lot of companies that are part of our extended value chain. If I talk about circularity, Unilever is not in the business of plastic collection or plastic processing or even recycling, but we are in need of it. And in the work that we've been able to do, which, yesterday we announced that we're now collecting more than we sell, it has been through investing in small organizations, small to medium organizations that had the willingness and intent to bring the right technology and needed investment and support. What we are doing as Unilever is a very small chunk, and I think that could be said for the industry as well. But if we were to look at financing in a way where companies are already investing, and to give this scale and really present this as cases where private sector investment can come in, we can be the advocates and attract that investment, and also, I think, put our skin in the game and leverage our credibility as global organizations to at least attract the private sector and investment that is available. It is already happening, but it is happening in isolation, which is why we don't really see the scale and that sort of um, larger impact of climate financing for Pakistan from that perspective. And I really believe that scope 3 is the area where private sector can play a bigger role. When it comes to national level investments, I think there's been a lot of money available, especially in the aftermath of the floods. We've struggled with the right projects. Uh, there is an opportunity to perhaps use our global network and reach and make sure that we can pull the right stakeholders into the room when we go to forums like the COP and the UNGC and all of those, and help the government of Pakistan. They already have the support of the likes of UNDP that are already doing great as advisory work, to be able to attract that money and bring it to Pakistan on those bankable projects by really giving our expertise where it can be provided. When it comes to circularity, for us, um we are already halfway on the goals that we have. Beyond this, it is a need on the larger ecosystem and infrastructure, which the private sector cannot achieve alone. It has to be hand in hand with the right policy frameworks from the government. It has to be realistic because I mean, we don't like plastics, but maybe the alternatives are not available in the way that we want today. And also on climate, we are already meeting our scope 1 and scope 2 emission and renewable energy targets. But beyond that, we are at capacity on solar. So how do we then unlock better progress through policies like power wheeling, through policies like better and more accessible availability of renewable energy? Because we might be able to put the cash behind it as the Unilevers, Nestle's, and Pepsi's of the world. What about our larger value chain, which is also looking for that support, but might not have that affordability right now?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Fatima, for very pertinently highlighting that there is finance available, monies are available. We need to find out the right initiatives that will create demand for those initiatives, and then we can have this market-based sort of thing going on, particularly in sustainability business, particularly for circular economy practices. How we can channel these monies toward these sustainability initiatives. We have a very relevant panelist, Mr. Adnan Pasha. Mr. Adnan is Head Development Finance at Habib Bank Limited. Sir, may I request you for this question? And in light of COP29's finance agenda, what climate finance instruments can be developed to facilitate access to financing for climate smart initiatives such as climate smart agriculture, land use practices? How can these instruments be aligned with COP29 as well? If you have slides and you want to come to the podium, you can come to the podium as well. So, may I request MIS team to play the slides as well?
Hear me now? Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm going to actually go straight to what we do, so the what and the why we know, but I'm just going to give it a little background on HBL and why we're on this journey. It's not just about finance. We are more than just a bank. And I'll explain to you the how part as to how we're achieving this. So about 4 years ago, HBL from our ethos perspective, we took climate to the heart of our value proposition, and we want to now embed that in everything that we do. So it's not a transactional thing for us, it's an ecosystem play. For that, we have a board level development finance committee. It's chaired by a former governor of the State Bank of Pakistan. There's a gentleman who's been with the World Bank for about 30, 35 years in DC. And there's a female director who was with the IBM for about 30 years. So, and I report to them. And what I'll talk about is what we're doing in Scope 3, because that's what we do. We finance activities. It'll be less transactional. It's more about developing the ecosystem with partners. And hopefully we will get back together with the UNDP. But just starting off,
Is there a pointer? You could hand over the pointer, please. Clicker.
Okay, sorry about that. Just a bit of technical glitch. Look, we are the largest systemically important bank in Pakistan, and we've been aligned with Pakistan's destiny even before this country was formed. So we started in 1941, and inshallah, as we believe in nation building, we'll be playing our role. Our strategy is to not just propel the economy forward, but also be relevant to our customers by leading the financial sector in terms of innovation as well. So it's not just a technical part, but on the financial innovation side, which I will talk about. Climate is a central theme, as I said, and we are well ahead on our journey to be net zero by 2030 on our Scope 1 and Scope 2. So from our own impact perspective, we're doing a lot of activities, including solarizing our branches, and we have about over 1,700 branches, the largest network. So gradually we're moving in that direction. We are also doing various activities in-house to build capacity, to make people aware, and transitioning, the institution and our vendors and under Scope 2. We're striving to achieve our Scope 3 goals, and, to transition our large loan portfolio to the extent possible toward, a climate-friendly risk portfolio. Now, I'm just going to start with what's really important here, because this is something from the World Economic Forum that I picked up. And we take risk and we manage risk, and we want to do it better. So in the next 10 years, we see, top 4 risks, or let's say if you put in the top 10 in terms of severity, the environmental risks are going to be, in the top 10. And you can see them there as extreme weather, the change in the biodiversity, natural resource degradation, pollution, and that lead to societal impact. So, societal related risks will transpire. So there are 2 of them up there. And naturally, the cyber, the IS, things we deal with every day, when your phone doesn't work or your mobile banking doesn't work. So that happens. But those are not going to be on the top of banking sector agenda, because this is what it's all about. Because if we can't control and manage risk better to do with the climate, it is all going to impact us, because our customers are going to get impacted where we've lent money, and naturally we get impacted. So I'm just giving you a bigger picture, because people need to understand why all banks need to look at it in this manner, not as CSR, not as a hobby. And we don't take it as a hobby, we take it very seriously. And we do work with this government as well to advise them on how to put methodologies and instruments in place to take funding out of this specific segment. On this slide, HBL, been growing our clean energy portfolio. There are certain things we have said no to. You can see that we have a policy by policy. We're running down our risk portfolio in terms of what we do with fossil related, and especially coal. So in about 5-6 years time, we'll be zero on debt and equity investments in that area. And we have a large commitment there. And we have upset a lot of our customers. but our board chose to do this, and we, as management, stand by it. So we are transitioning our risk portfolio that way. When it comes to items that are like, the tobacco sector as well, we're running that down. When it comes to clean energy, we have over 35 billion rupees outstanding to, the clean energy side. It includes not just what we lend to our corporate customers for them to go and set up, independent power projects for wind and for solar, but also for the farmers. And I will talk about it because that's another initiative we are taking independently of the subsidized funding that comes in from the regulator, because that is just not sustainable in our mind. We were the first bank and we to take a leap forward in terms of creating a taxonomy, a green taxonomy. That's well on our way. We worked with Dr. Majun out of China. And there are reasons for that, because as I said, climate change is real. We need to not just look at the adaptation, which we talk about, but the mitigation, also how we can efficiently redeploy resources and develop an ecosystem from a conservation perspective as well. Next slide. So from an agriculture perspective, and I'll talk about agriculture and SME, that's a sweet spot for us going forward. And it's very obvious. I mean, 63% of our GDP, 64% of our population lives in rural areas. We have a huge outreach out there, but we don't bank them really. We don't do much with them. And that's the opportunity as well. So we need to understand the risk and then convert that in opportunity so that we make them bankable. And I think Samuel mentioned bankability. So we are taking measures in looking at banking and risk metrics in a different manner so that we can make it business as usual for the bank to adopt. So for that, we conducted also, besides, doing climate smart agriculture, standard lending for hydroponics for the larger farmers, right? I mean, for tunnel farming and central pivots, greenhouses, these are pretty standard, but we do more of it. We're the largest lender in agriculture, but we're pivoting the way we do business toward green and clean. And it's not just the financing, but it's how we approach it. So about 2020, we hired up to 87 agronomists locally in Pakistan on my payroll. And they worked for HBL with the farmer, and we did various pilots over 45,000 crop acres on main crops. And we didn't give them cash. We gave them inputs. So whether it was urea, whether it was pesticides, whether it was good quality seeds, and then we provided free of cost agronomy advice. And the idea was sort of key metrics were to increase water usage efficiency, crop input efficiency, and also test precision farming instruments, where we again allied with NUST and various other institutes. So we've tested IoTs, we've tested remote sensing, drones, we've kind of done all that with business partners, right? Just moving on, I mean, I just want to tell you what it led to, because over a period of 3 years, you're just looking at the food crops here, we managed to increase the average yield for about 45% on average. You'll see various numbers there. The cost also declined because we were offering inputs at the MRP, the manufacturer's retail price, rather than the marked up price, which typically dealers would charge. And then naturally, we were helping the farmers sell their crop. So it was like a farm to processor model. That worked really well. We had validation independently by Princeton and SERP. Dr. Ataf Mia was involved himself. And that got published, and it's all on our sustainability page on our home HBL page. So if anyone wants to take a look at that. That led last year, to the end of last year, for HBL to be granted a license so we set up a Section 42 company. And now we have an ancillary service provider called HBL Zarai Services. We funded that by about 7.5 billion rupees, about $27 million commitment, equity, zero debt. And we'll continue doing that. And we are going to be trying to leverage the bank's balance sheet to do more in the real sector. Now, moving on, and we want others to, other banks to adopt this model because that's the only way this economy will prosper, right? From the ground up. And what I'm talking to you about is the tactical level. It's not high level. We actually do it. And gentleman here who was sitting next to me earlier, he said, till you do it, you don't know. It's very important that you show people how it's done, and others should become your partners in it. So it's not a zero-sum game. We want other banks and other lenders to work with us on this. So what's good for our customers and for the country is good for Pakistan and for HBL. Moving on to the next slide, please. What we're going to be doing going forward, some areas we're focusing on is on pure clean energy, primarily at the farmer, at the data, at his home or her home level. We will also give this to small processors of agro produce to do this at chuck level, right? At the community, small, like 80 houses or so. And we also want to go into distributed mini grids. And we are looking for business partners there. So it's literally an announcement reaching out to people who would want to work with HBL in these areas. We also are going to go into waste to energy, waste to biofuels. And these are all independent businesses going forward probably, right? Because we want businesses to come into it and we can then finance it, but we'll have to show people that, look, we will literally mitigate the risk for you. We will do the hard yards first if that needs to be done. Just last week, I was talking to some entrepreneurs in Karachi who are into EV. And so 2- and 3-wheeler bikes. No one does that in banking at the moment. We are going to do that. We're going to take that leap. And what that does is that allows the common man to become bankable. So we'll try and find solutions how we can explain to them why they need to do this, where they at the moment do not have access to, power charging. But we have datas, in Burewala, in Saiwal, in Pakpatan, in Dipalpur. So what it's doing is it'll open up opportunities for people to adopt, right? So awareness and then adoption. Just moving on very quickly because I'm going to go to what we can do on climate finance and per se. I mean, there are economic benefits to it. There's a very detailed outline here, not just creating jobs and reducing costs, but also, the climate-related impact. There will be carbon credits that can be generated. We have already at the farmer level, 24 megawatts that we're giving out in terms of financing to farmers individually, but those will not be eligible because we don't own the asset. Now, I've been told I have like 60 seconds, so I'm going to quickly go to the next slide and the next two. Look, there are other where we need help and for the regulators to come in. There's precedents in China and in Indonesia where they have subsidized initially by giving, allowing banks to extend commercial loans at 60% of the principal. So, 2.25% below the prime. Also potentially reducing the reserve requirements on the capital. And lastly, you go to the next slide. Oh, let's just skip this, please. Yeah. I mean, here's some actually examples that I want to put in front of you. This is something not new. We've already been talking to a couple of ministries here in the last literally 3 years, explaining to them how we can help them with other partners raise funding from climate bonds, from debt to nature swaps, and catastrophe bonds. There's no rocket science. It's been done in other markets. What I'm showing you here are some instruments which people should look at. I mean, there's been done in similar markets. And what you see here is what's been done in Mexico. It's been done in South Africa, in the Philippines, and it's been done pretty successfully. So there are models we can share with people who in the ministries as well, and we can literally handhold and walk them through. I know the Ministry of Finance is well ahead on that journey. We're already looking to, you must have heard in the finance minister talking about the panda bonds in a year and a half or so. But a lot of these instruments can be designed. We need partners and we need the commitment to do the whole hog. Lastly, reminds me of this last adage that I was reading the other day, that two roads diverged in a yellow wood and I could only take one and I chose the one less traveled by. And that I want to stay on because that will make the difference. So thank you for listening, and I'd like to meet anyone who's interested. I'm based in Islamabad now for the last 6 months, to actually take discussions forward in a meaningful way, not just for COP, but to actually deploy solutions in the field. And we're happy to do pilots with anyone who's interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Adnan Saab, for this very, I would say, a workable sort of thing that can intermediate the role of banks and how we can bring finances and transform financing. One thing that you mentioned clicked my mind is this growing initiatives in terms of emission trading schemes and other financial instruments that will bring more light towards mitigation efforts. So maybe we need to invest more in mitigation side as well. Obviously, adaptation is important, but mitigation is obviously the integral part of it. This will brings me to Mr. Fawad Sumro. Mr. Fawad is from Angro Foundation. Mr. Fawad, what public-private partnerships could scale emission reductions efforts within the industrial sector? How might these efforts aligned with COP29's goal for clean energy transition and corporate climate action as well? So over to you, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible? So, building upon what Adnan also presented and the previous talk about, variety of potential, climate finance instruments that are available. The nature of the challenge is such that it cannot be addressed, as Fatma said, by private sector alone. So it requires creative partnerships, and public-private partnership is one definite component of it. But as of now, if we take a bottoms-up view, and this view is not solely mine. I mean, I'll quote a recent event that took place in Karachi, Climate Finance Accelerator by DI, funded by FCDO, I think. And it was interesting that, 7, 8 shortlisted potential investments, they were there and they were making their pitch also. And the conversation eventually went into a direction that the true climate finance that would actually support them, those startups which have, fairly credible line of path in terms of business model and activities and doability in Pakistani context, was struggling to have, the right kind of finance. And the challenges that they were facing in terms of available so-called financing in Pakistani market, either the ticket size was, too big, or the requirements in terms of risk-taking in terms of, meeting the minimum requirement of even DFIs was a bit challenging for those startups. And mind you, these were the startups which were shortlisted and went through a, rigorous process of filtration. And so the bottoms-up view right now is that there is financing from the likes of, for example, GCF. GCF is notoriously, sorry, sir, it's notoriously difficult to access the financing. So there is a need for, in terms of making it, the access to those funds should be eased in terms of policy recommendations. I think Aisha was supposed to be here. The Recharge Pakistan took so long in terms of, getting on ground. There was not even an investment project. So it's more like a sort of a grant-like project. So similarly, in terms of, the need for innovative finance. So for example, very recently, InfraZaman has done this gender bond that kind of provides that structure that could be used in the climate finance as well. But we don't see that kind of, underwriting or first loss arrangements from current financial institutions, which can be, used in the climate projects. So there's a need for those, and it of course requires favorable regulations. And so there is a policy intervention required over here in terms of making these kind of risk-taking more favorable. And of course, the access to the carbon markets, I think it's still such a tangible opportunity that we are unable to cash on, because the process of getting to carbon markets while sitting here in Pakistan is such a potential opportunity that we are unable to cash on, because the process of getting to carbon markets while sitting here in Pakistan is such a potential opportunity that we are.
May I request the IT team to look at this glitch, because
I think it's the echo. So I just give you example of if you go outside Pepsi's stall, they have put up 2 trays of biochar. Biochar is when you do the pyrolysis of biomass, and in a country like Pakistan with agriculture background and the amount of biomass that is available to us, which is also blamed for part of the problem of smog that Lahore and Punjab gets, is something that is carbon negative method. It's the only carbon negative method available, which is which is not tech incentive. And we have not been able to sort of capitalize on that. It's a very simple process of pyrolysis that can be done in an industrial way, or even it could be done in a decentralized way at farm level, where an individual farmer could actually produce biochar. The benefits of biochar in terms of its use in land, which increases soil's capacity to absorb more carbon and support microbes. So the both biodiversity and carbon impact could be realized. But the fact that carbon credit of biochar, which is carbon removal methodology, is 8 to 10 times more attractive compared to regular carbon credit. So this, in a way, we are sitting on this opportunity, but we are unable to capitalize on that, because access to carbon markets while sitting here in Pakistan is virtually impossible in terms of the barriers to the entry to the market. Similar is the case, and Nestle's team would be interested in listening to this. We looked at animal feed ingredient which reduces enteric methane in cattle, and again the struggle of finding methodology, the relevant methodology in voluntary market was in itself was a struggle. We had to sort of do extensive consultations externally out of Pakistan to even figure out the methodology. And that too methodology was developed very recently, and there's a whole opportunity towards working with likes of Vera and Gold Standard to even develop methodologies which suit our market, for example. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done. And in the end, I would say one thing, that the strategic use of philanthropic funds is very important in this scenario, because the current finance, available finance, does not allow that sort of experimentation where a lot of risk taking is involved. And I think the only support can come in from philanthropic capital. And so either in the shape of, DFIs supporting, providing those guarantees or first loss, cushion, or foundations using money to sort of experiment with pilots. I think that conversation should also happen in the overall climate finance space. So the current regular risk capital, I don't think, is willing to take on that risk of experimental solutions. And of course, because of the methodology of having certain minimum ticket size, I think those are the barriers which only philanthropic capital can perhaps fill in at this point in time. Philanthropic capital, of course, is limited, and it has huge opportunity cost in terms of if it were to be diverted towards climate solutions. There will be potential trade-off with the social outcomes where a lot of capital is being deployed. So this landscape in that sense is tricky, and bottoms-up view is, in my opinion, it's a little difficult for the climate-oriented startups, particularly.
yeah, thank you so much, Subra sir. You're very right that we need to focus on these innovative financial instruments, particularly from the mitigation angle. And you mentioned the philanthropic capital, which is going to be important in mitigation side. Just one example of it, Rockefeller and other philanthropic organizations, they are looking into using carbon markets as a tool to retire fossil fuel-based power plants, particularly coal plants, with their initiative that is coal to clean carbon credit initiative, CCCI. That would be a game changer. So maybe these initiatives can be looked particularly from the angle of Pakistan. Before I go towards the session chair, Dr. Mohammad Rafiq, let me ask Waqar Saab. Waqar Saab, Nestle is investing hugely on resource efficiency, particularly in terms of water conservation. How do you see that these initiatives are scaling up on industrial level, and how we can brought into these initiatives in a more affordable, sustainable way so that the industry can adopt those as well?
Thank you very much. So I think Nestle is not only, I would say, doing on the water conservation. I think it's a bigger journey. So we have very clear sustainability agenda. It has very clear three pillars, three most important pillars. One is focused very much on climate action, and where we talk about the investment on the climate initiatives. Then they are very much focused on sustainable plastic, which also includes projects which it talks about and which are we are engaging at the community level, which are on collection and recycling, facilitating waste management from very difficult areas in Pakistan. And then lastly is our Caring for Water initiative, where we have made a pledge of, and all these areas have very clear commitments. Similarly, water has its own a commitment and a pledge that by 2025, all the water that we use in our water business will be regenerated. So whatever we use in our processes and in packaging, that will be regenerative, putting back into the soil. So if I start from the, take the broader view, and if I look at the climate action part, and I think what's also the theme of this session also, so here I think is very important what Nestle is doing today is not only focusing what is traditional way of looking into climate investments, that is only focusing on solar or renewable energy, and that we are doing in a very big way. So we have two big solar investments in terms of 3.5 megawatts in Kabirwala factory, another 3.6 in Shekhupura, and there are two more in pipeline, which will be done by before the end of 2025. Then we have already addressing the challenge that we face in Punjab, especially when it comes to agri-waste. So we have put up a large biomass plant in Kabirwala, which will be consuming almost like 37,000 tons of agri-waste, and the emission that it will control is more than 10,500 tons of CO2. And in a very simple terms, it's just like taking out 2,400 cars out of roads annually. So that kind of impact that we are focusing on, this is very traditional way of doing it. We are doing it. But we are also working very much also looking into our agri-value chain. We are predominantly a dairy company. So what is very important is to look into dairy value chain. So we are working very closely with our farmers, helping them import, right kind of animals from various countries, mainly from Australia, Netherlands and US, and these are more efficient cows. So these cows are efficient in the means because they are less on emissions. So per liter emission is much lesser than any normal cow. So that's another way of investing in climate change. There we are collaborating with our farmer by 30% financing for our farmers. So that's a non-traditional way on looking into it, how we are engaging within our value chain. So starting from a bigger way within our closed doors of our manufacturing, and then seeing how we can use this waste coming from the agriculture side, which causes smog. And then the last, which I've told you, working on with farmers, and not there. We also engaging farmers when it comes to creating biomass at the farms and creating solar energy at the farms. So these initiatives help in reducing our emission, which is a bigger thing for us when it comes on reducing CO2. The second biggest element of our strategy is sustainable plastics. So there also we are very clear and focused that what we have to do is, I think is a very big step that we have taken is to reducing use of virgin plastics in our packaging. So we have a target to reduce this by 1/3 by 2025, and also making sure that our packaging materials are more they're designed for recycling. So even because if your packaging is not designed for recycling, So even if you collect, you cannot recycle them, right? So that's another step. Plus, we are also engaging in innovative projects on system for recycling. Our flagship project is with Gilgit-Baltistan, where we started some 5 years back with helping the Gilgit-Baltistan Waste Management Company by facilitating only 100 tons of waste. Today, this year will be closed with 4,000 tons of plastic packaging, and the paper packaging waste will be facilitated for recycling. What we did with them, we provided them some baling and compressing machine, because with such a high altitude, the challenge was that, the tourist when comes up, and we all know the phenomena the last 6 years, that everyone rushed to these beautiful places in Pakistan. But what as a tourist we were doing, we are leaving behind a lot of waste. This waste was not generated by the local inhabitants, it was generated by us. So the challenge was what to do with the waste. And they had a very good waste management company. So they were collecting it, but they were not finding a solution of how to manage, what are the next steps they can do. So they were either burning it, throwing it into the river, or the last thing was, there were informal ways of, involving some recyclers. So by us giving them this, baling and compressing and baling machine, it created a new business model where now a truck of, which takes waste of 1 ton in a way, by compressing it, now it can take 9 to 10 tons of waste back to with the help of recycler back to Islamabad or Lahore for recycling purposes. So those kind of initiatives that we have done, and it's really helped them. And there are a lot more we are doing there in terms of changing behaviors, engaging with the communities there, what can be done even with the hospitality industry there, how can they manage their waste better. But those are the smaller components. So that's what the biggest step that we have taken there. So this is more on sustainable packaging. When it comes to water, that your question was, so it's a very clear agenda that we have. So there we had made a pledge that by 2025, the water that we use will be neutralized. In fact, we will regenerate water. And we have very clear targets. So we have already, by this year, last year we closed with 80%, and now we are moving ahead that by 2025. And this closure will be more advanced of regenerating it, and how we were doing it. So there we were engaging with the farmers. And that's where, is water, misuse of water has its own challenges. And we know Pakistan is agriculture economy. So 90% of the water used in this country is in irrigation or in agriculture. And then 50% of that is wasted because of bad agriculture or irrigation practices. So we try to work with our farmers. And this is what to introduce drip irrigation. We started with very few farmers some few years back. And then the first step was the drip irrigation, working with the World Bank project where we were the co-financer. And we helped them, our farmer, to adopt those practices. Especially, we started with our dairy value chain, and then we grew it to areas like mango orchards, guava orchards, and the kinnu orchards. And we really, spread ourselves all across Punjab. This year, we also entered in Sindh as well. So there also we are working now with various kind of growers who are with all these practices of reducing use of water in their farming practices. We are reducing use, and this is what we are gaining. And then what we, a few years back, in collaboration with LUMS, we created the special smart soil moisture sensors. And the job of this sensor is, it can actually tell you, how much your farm or your soil requires of water. And it's connected with the cloud system. So you can check on your mobile also how much the water is required by the land. And then accordingly, you can release. So they were shifting from flood irrigation to more smart methods, smart agriculture methods, and that have really helped them reduce. There's a lot of saving for the farmer, and these were mostly adopted by those who were in the tail end, and they were not closer to the canals, where water, they have to get water generated through, this use of water pumps. So one is help them to reduce, yes, water, but also saving them on energy as well. So that's really help us to reduce, and this is how helping us. We are reaching our water pledge. Because for very first day, we know that, we are very efficient within our 4 walls. The challenge is within the farmers that we are working with. So that's how we have done it on the water side. So clearly, as I mentioned in the start, our sustainability agenda is very clearly focused on climate action, sustainable packaging, and then when it comes to water, this is how we are reducing use of water with the help of our farmers. And that's helped us achieve our numbers when it comes for our, the manufacturing and the water that we all love to drink. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Waqar sir, for highlighting this whole of sector, whole of society approach. Obviously, for this effective climate action, we need to join our hand. To joining our hand, this brings me to Dr. Mohammad Rafiq. Dr. Mohammad Rafiq is member climate finance at Pakistan Climate Change Authority. Sir, you have listened to the remarks from the multi-sector stakeholders. How you can bring this agenda into broader climate finance architecture, and how policy dimensions can be integrated to it, how public-private partnership can be brought into the policy arena. With this, I request you for the concluding remarks. You can take the podium as well if you want to.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. I'm from the Climate Change Authority, which is a recently established authority and implementing arm of the Ministry of Climate Change. We are an autonomous organization. The mandate is to implement the policies like the National Climate Change Policy, NDC, NAP, and all the national and the provincial policies. We are with the mandate with the whole of Pakistan. We are 5 technical members, chairman, member adaptation, member mitigation, member climate finance, member coordination, and there are 4 provincial members nominated by their respective government, and 2 co-opted members from GB and AJK. So this is sort of a board, and they will have their team soon. I said we are a very nascent organization set up by the government of Pakistan. And the main reason is what I've been listening to all the discussion. And let me tell you, I'm very happy to see so much going on. But it's not very well reported, like what Jason said and what you described, and from the banks and from, so there is need to be more collaboration, and that's why we are here to have more coordination vertically and horizontally. And as I've told you about the structure that we are with the provincial members and all those people, we would really like to work closely with every sector of the economy. And one more thing which may be a good news for all of you is that given our mandate, we are trying to establish the National Climate Change Fund, which will be, it's in the pipeline. As I told you, it's just been a month that we are here. So we are also working on hiring the team. We will have a team of 72 people as permitted by the government. So, so the job is to have more and more coordination. See, everything is happening, we talk about biochar, we talk about carbon markets, we talk about GLUF, we talk about OICC investment, 1.3 billion, you said. It's a huge money. But it's not very well coordinated. It's not very well reported. So the idea is to get all this information, see where the loopholes are, implement them. So the good news is that, yes, we are coming with a Section 42 company. We have sent the modalities to the government, about the government processes and all those things, but it's in the pipeline. So the government is going to give us seed money, and then we'll have the strategy to mobilize more and more funds. So one can be carbon markets, as you were saying. The carbon market policy has been approved by the National Climate Change Council. There were some differences with the provinces, so it's not been actually signed, but it's there. Provinces, they have agreed to it. So the voluntary carbon markets is coming up. Yes, hopefully after the COP. The National Climate Finance Strategy, which is prepared by the MOCC, Ministry of Climate Change, will be announced by the Prime Minister in the COP, hopefully. So these things are happening. But really, when I look at it's a huge challenge. See, we need $348 billion. According to the World Bank report, there are different statistics. 196 for decarbonization and remaining for the adaptation. I mean, this is the sum of money. And the expectations are that we are only be able to mobilize 48 billion. So you can see the difference, the 300 billion difference. So from where we are going to fill that? You know, so the private sector is actually the one of the way out where we can mobilize finances. But to mobilize, I mean, to just say why private sector would come is there should be a clear-cut roadmaps, sectoral roadmaps, and then guidelines and policy and all those things, so that people can invest. So there should be some guidelines for the microfinancing in the green sectors, the SMEs, then the 90% of the business is SMEs. So green SMEs, right? Now the green SMEs, if we talk about, they have challenges. Like they have challenges like macroeconomic challenges, the currency delinking, how that can be done. Are there funds available? The interest rate challenge. So we need blended finances. So maybe this climate change finance the fund can be something very useful where it can provide blended finance. And it can also be used for co-financing of the bigger projects. Then for the bigger project, for the large tickets you talk about, so we need green SMEs. So what are the incentives? Where are the incentives? The markets needs to be functional for them so that it indicates where it should lead. But the taxonomy is the most important thing. We need proper definition, proper guidelines to just save ourselves from greenwashing. So lots of things are happening and they say it's green finance or it's green investment, but it's not actually. So the taxonomy is very important. Ministry is working on that. Hopefully this will also come up. The State Bank is working on that. I heard from you as well about the green, from the HBL, Adnan Pasha Sahab. The taxonomy is very important. And then the blended finances are important. The special, equity finances, and especially for the women-led businesses. That's very, very important for the inclusiveness. I mean, so what we are trying to do is, so far what we have done in 1 month is we have held 2 meetings of the Pakistan Climate Change Authority. So we are taking all the provinces on board as what is the road ahead. We have developed a roadmap as what we are going to do. So given our mandate, we are supposed to implement the policies, we are supposed to mobilize finances, we are supposed to develop the capacity, awareness raising, and all those things are according to Climate Change Act 2017 is the mandate of the Climate Change Authority. So we are committed to it. We are doing our every bit. We are sending memos and letters to provinces for the stock taking, and after that we are going to set up some working groups for the implementation of those policies, as well as we are designing some templates for project call, etc. And that's what we are trying to do. So lots of things. I mean, I cannot tell you each and every bit of it, but this is what we are trying to do, and I hope that we will be able to, just make this difference with whatever approach we adopt. We are open to all the suggestions. We are open to partnerships. We are looking really forward to it, and hopefully we'll steer the ship, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Rafiq, for highlighting that we need this collaborative approach, and happy to hear that Climate Change Authority is open to collaboration, because this is collaboration that will bring more effectiveness to climate action. With this, I thank my panelists, the audience. This has been a wonderful session. Obviously, these findings and these insightful discussion would be feeding into the process of COP, where OICCI would also be organizing a panel on November 14th. That would be private sector engagement and effective key to climate action. So join us there as well, and OICCI. With this, on behalf of SDPI and OICCI, I thank you all. Thank you so much. With this, I request panelists for a group photo. Thank you so much.